Right, okay. We're going to kick off the first of our breakout sessions, or the first breakout session which you're all part of, which is on going up in circles, making the most of the opportunities in the circular economy. And, you know, circular economy is one of those phrases that's gone from a sort of academic idea to something that's suddenly approaching the Holy Grail, which we're all supposed to strive after. It is always tempting to rehash terrible old jokes, and I certainly will not resist. So it has been said by me, just in a minute, that when people talk about the circular economy, they're a lot like teenage boys talking about sex, and that they all say they're doing it, but most of them aren't, and those that aren't doing it very well. Which I completely excuse all the panelists from any implications in that one, because they're all doing it to some extent anyway, and I think you're mostly all doing it very well. We'll hear just how in a second. I'm just going to introduce them, sweeping along from my right. Harriet Lamb has a glittering history in the sustainability movement. She ran all sorts of things, Fairtrade International, Ashton, the Climate Solutions charity. She's been awarded a CBE, she's been Orange Businesswoman of the Year, and much more impressive, she's been Cosmopolitan's Eco Queen. She is now CEO of WRAP, whose motto, I think, is helping you protect the planet by changing the way things are produced, consumed, and disposed of. Moving on, Mark Yankovic left a career in banking because he said he wanted to do something more fulfilling in his life. Have we got any bankers in the audience? I'm sure you're the good sort. I'm sure you're the fulfilled sort. That something is Delphis Eco, which specializes in cleaning products that are about as sustainable as they come. Mark's also behind various other sustainability initiatives, including the Recycle Plastic Rating trademark, and he's a Global Good Award winner. As are Toast Ale, next to Mark, represented here by their co-founder, Louisa Zayan. Oh, damn. Who's Zayan? Sorry, I practiced before as well. If you've been to a Global Good Awards ceremony before, you will have had a chance to taste their excellent product and marvel at the fact it's made from surplus bread that would otherwise be binned. So it's kind of circularity in a glass. Next to Louisa, Gareth Dinage, manager of C Corp Printing, the not inconsiderable accolade of the highest scoring B Corp printing company on the planet. Relentless pursuit of sustainable solutions has won it 4 Queen's Awards for sustainable development, and it was named as the most sustainable SME by the EU in 2017. So hopefully it's not an SME anymore, or maybe it is. And last but not least, Chiduben Nabufo. Her day, I practiced that too. Her day job is literally to make the circular economy happen. She does so at KPMG, where she's got the great job title of ESG, Strategy, Climate Risk and Circularity. She played her part in helping KPMG win several Global Good Awards. And before joining KPMG, she was Circular Economy Specialist at West Yorkshire Combined Authority, so badgering the county's business to embrace circular principles. And as my dear departed dad would have said, if I can do it in Yorkshire, I can do it anywhere. So we're going to kick off with a few brief opening remarks from each of our panelists. I will scowl at them if they go over their 5 or 6 minutes, because we've got to keep cracking on here from you guys too. I'll jump in with a couple of questions after that, and then we'll go to Slido, which I can see very clearly right in front of me here. So, Harriet, kick us off. Circular economy, what's it all about?
Well, is this on? Yeah, very good. Well, I think the first thing is to say it is growing. There's absolutely no question that the circular economy is growing really fast. And I kind of think we're on the cusp of breaking through into the mainstream. There are already more jobs in the circular economy than there are in waste. It's about 500,000. It's grown by 20% between 2014 and 2019. Undoubtedly, we could create another 500,000 jobs if we had the right policies in place to support it. And I think within the circular economy, we can see 2 things. You've got your circular natives. You've got companies that are founded from the very beginning, putting circularity into their design. So one of my favorite examples, and we at WRAP seek to support the circular economy. And one of the things we've done was back an accelerator with Amazon. And one of the companies there, I brought it with me, my Exhibit A, is this lead that comes from a company called Tangle. And they rescue all the fish net that is abandoned at the sea and causing problems for the fish. And they buy that from the fishermen, and then they turn it into these very beautiful doggy accessories. And as they say, they are leading by example. And so you have companies like that. You have a restaurant, Silo, for those of you who live in London. It's a little bit of a trek up to Walthamstow. A restaurant that starts with the bin. That's their logo. They start by trying to make sure nothing goes in the bin. Trying to, from the beginning, design out waste and design in circularity. As indeed, I think our food here today is like that, as indeed toast using surplus bread. I think there's more and more of the circular natives, which are the really exciting companies that are the cutting edge. And we need these better companies to become bigger. But we also need the bigger companies to become better. Otherwise, we're whistling in the wind. So we've got the challenge, I think, is how do you take these principles of circularity and back them into companies that have been absolutely founded on a principle of extract, consume, chuck? And how do we help those bigger companies really take on board tackling unsustainable consumption, going back to our earlier discussion today? And I think it's really interesting. You look at companies like IKEA, founded on the principle of fast furniture. One of the pillars that they're quite openly discussing now is how to address unsustainable consumption and make products that are good for people and the planet. And they're quite open about that. So that's why they've started doing take-back schemes. They're doing resell. We've seen, for example, of course, eBay and Love Island up for an award, I think, today. Again, taking the principles of circularity very mainstream through something like Love Island and trying to really popularize it, which I think is a core challenge to all of us that maybe we can discuss. No one's ever really heard of the circular economy. I think circular living gets a bit closer. It's coming away from the Chancellor's domain, a bit more into our living rooms, but I still don't think that's quite there. And I think if we could collectively think, what is it that would help propel it forward? I think that is the next thing to help popularize it with the public, who we do see going to Decathlon, who are increasingly offering reuse, or going into Currys, who are offering repair. So you can get wonderful community initiatives that are about repair, or the Library of Things that are about, so you don't have to all buy a lawnmower that you use very rarely. You can hire it when you need it. And those are the community base that can help nurture it. And then you need to get in the mainstream where Currys is saying, once you've bought something and if it's broken down, you can bring it back to us. And so I think we've got those two, the circular natives and helping the big boys go circular. And if we can get that next cut through, some of which will be regulation, some of which can be up to all of us.
Great, thank you. Mark.
I've got an ask. I have a question for everybody on the panel, which goes back to where I started in the cleaning journey. I obviously, you heard, left banking and woke up one day and went, what is my purpose? Banking was not very fulfilling, and I wanted to do something a whole lot more important to my soul. And the one thing that I have worked out, ironically, in the journey is that I hate waste. It's endemic in me being OCD. I don't like waste, and funnily enough, in the cleaning industry, there's a load of waste, be it formulations, be it packaging, be it transport, be it production. There's a lot, so coming into the industry with no previous conceived ideas, I looked at it from the ground up and asked all sorts of questions and made all sorts of random phone calls and met lots of people on the panel on this journey, and I've systematically kind of knocked off a bunch of them. So I've knocked off our production piece. I've knocked off our packaging or our boxes, our bottles. We were the first to produce 100% UK collected recycled plastic. So we now have 100% grade PCR plastic. It took 6 years. That can't happen again. It can't take 6 years again. Labels, Gareth's got an amazing business. I go around the world telling everybody about Gareth's business. Can we produce anything that's printed with a net zero carbon footprint. We can, Gareth proved it. But my ask to everybody on the panel and to everybody in the room and everybody listening, we make our products out of we have virgin ingredients, i.e. rapeseed, sugar beet, sugar cane. Those are still virgin products. How do I take a waste product and make a cleaning ingredient? How do I take food waste and take the fatty acids that come out of the slurry of food waste? And it's possible, we know it's possible, but nobody in the UK is doing it that I can see. So my ask to everybody is that, how do we do that? The horrendous statistic is Europe throws away more food than Africa produces per year. So can we take that as that waste system, can we turn it into something that has a second life? And can we turn it into a cleaning product? And that's the challenge to everybody, and making it more circular, or making it completely, we have to be thinking like that. We have to stop wasting products and bring it around.
Thanks, Mark. Louisa.
Hi. So yeah, just for those who don't know Toast, we work with bakeries. We take the surplus bread and the sandwich industry, so the end slices of every loaf usually would be discarded in the production of packaged sandwiches. And if you imagine how many sandwiches we eat, that's a lot of bread that's wasted, about 20 million slices just in our homes. And then we have the entire supply chain of bakers and sandwich companies to tackle. So we purchase that surplus bread and we use it to replace about 25% of malted barley that you would usually brew with. We also then have all of our profits are dedicated to charities so that we can support systemic change within the food system that's also needed, because our purpose is not just tackling food waste. Our purpose is to protect and regenerate the natural world. And for us, tackling food waste is part of the solution. It's a simple, cost-effective, one of the most equitable measures that we can take in the climate crisis, as ranked by Project Drawdown. So I like to think about food waste as a huge opportunity that we have. We know that our food system is responsible for 80% of deforestation, 70% of freshwater use, a third of greenhouse gas emissions, and yet we waste a third of all the food we produce. So by tackling food waste, we support that. But another aspect of Toast's business is to collaborate with others and to try to drive systemic change with some of those bigger companies. We've worked with hundreds of brewers around the world, but what we've seen is that it is either a kind of PR one-off initiative, or it's too difficult for brewers to do long term. So we're actually developing a business at the moment that's an ingredients company where we will source, process, and then supply surplus bread to brewers. It will be cost effective so that it is at price parity with malt, so that we can actually help to drive change much more broadly within our industry. And another big part of Toast's mission is about raising awareness. For me, one of the reasons we waste so much food is because we've lost touch with where our food comes from. I think, as our consumer society, we see the final product on the shelf as we're purchasing in the supermarket. We don't see the journey that food has been on. I'm a very keen, avid gardener, and I like to grow some of my own food at home. But I understand the pain of planting a seed and it not becoming anything, the pain of seeing shoots come and slugs, snails, and bugs eating that. So the joy of getting that one cucumber to grow means I'm never going to waste it. And I think that translates to understanding and respecting our farmers and the time, the energy, the knowledge, the experience, the love that goes into producing our food. So a big part of what we do is also about raising awareness of our food system and how beautiful and important it is, so that we can bring back that custodial relationship for our food.
Thanks very much. Gareth.
Hi everyone. So I'm Gareth. I'm Is this working? Yeah. I'm Gareth. I'm the MD of a company called Secourt, and we're an example, I guess, of an aged business. Our business wasn't set up with the principles of circularity or environmental thinking. Our business was set up back in 1946, and our journey really is one of ambition and just an example, as all of the guys there, and I'm sure you guys as well, is just how far this sense of ambition can get you if you remain vigilant and focus on actually what you want to achieve. So the board before mine found out in the mid-90s just how damaging our industry, the printing industry, is really quite nasty. Consumes huge amounts of waste, pretty much as the same amount of waste as you, Mark, I guess, I don't know, but it uses huge amounts of chemicals, huge amounts of water, huge amounts of paper, huge carbon impacts, energy. And we found this out and we thought, no, this is not nice. This is not what we want to be involved with. We do not want to go to work. We don't want to go to work and be part of this problem. We want to actually do something about it. So we've been on a journey for 27 years to design waste out of every single part of our business. And we've achieved some really quite cool things. So we've gone from being a serious contributor of carbon to being net carbon negative, with our scopes 1 and 2 down to 0.7% of our total impacts, the rest of it being in the supply chain, because we've just refined and designed our processes over the years. And the whole thing that's kept us going, and I think that's really what I wanted to get across speaking with you guys, is that anything is possible. But it's understanding that there is an issue to start with, and actually having the dedication and ambition not to stop, and to be relentless, and to be vigilant and focused on actually what we want to achieve. For me, I mean, we achieved zero waste to landfill in 2009, and we got there after me jumping in a waste bin and figuring out what is in this bin, because we've designed all the waste out of the system. We've got this single bin of what's in there, and it turns out there was people's sandwiches and crisp packets and stuff that was nothing to do with the business. So I said, right, guys, I don't bring your food in, but take it away. That's not my problem. Then we got some wormeries on site to work through our organic waste stream. And then all of a sudden, we've got liquid wormweed that we're giving to clients to put on their allotments to fuel their stuff. So a problem becomes a solution. And this happens simply because you think this stuff through. And ultimately, where we've got to is we are leading, and where I want to get to, and what's really exciting, is trying to get to a regenerative business in its entirety, being a green swan, as John Elkington has coined of late, you know, actually rewriting the rules of a sector and showing that actually you can take an industry which is polluting, which is resource intensive, and you can absolutely turn it on its head and create a solution where now I've got 138 solar panels on our roofs that are powering the factory. We've invented our own printing technology. We don't use water. We don't use high VOCs. We generate zero waste to landfill, and we're net carbon negative from forest to end of life. That position is significantly different to where we started, but we've still got plenty to go after because we haven't stopped. And again, to come back to this persistence and absolute dedication of having a vision. What do you want to stand for? You know, Mark's journey is exactly an example of that. You want to do something. You want to be proud of achieving something. For us, we want to get to being totally regenerative. So we've achieved a lot, but there's still much more to go after.
Thanks very much, Mark. Chidubem.
First of all, hi, and thank you for having me. Okay, so I come at it from quite a different perspective because we have almost two sides to it. So like at KPMG, we have our internal approach of being a zero waste business, and we set a goal to be zero waste by 2030. We have a lot of offices within the UK, so we're proactively kind of almost trying to lead by example. But another aspect of the work that we do, and a lot of the stuff that I do day to day, is actually convincing the big companies of how to set their strategy. What does circular economy actually mean for them? What does that look like within their business? And how do you go from a linear model where you take, you make, and you waste, to one that is kind of more regenerative, minimizes waste, minimizes pollution? And what's really interesting is that I think, Harry, you're completely right. It feels like we're on the cusp of something, because we're getting a lot more questions from our clients and like massive companies that are global to understand, okay, what exactly is this circularity thing? And how do we go from pilot, which is often, and I think you mentioned it with Toast kind of coming in and doing a lot of pilot projects, there's been a lot of interest in circularity, but it's been at a pilot stage. And clients are starting to understand, okay, there is a big opportunity to use circularity as a lever for decarbonization, as well as minimizing their impact on nature. Because, and I'll just throw out a couple of like random stats at you. And so 45% of emissions are connected with resources. So when we reduce, energy consumption, and when the grid is green, there is still that 45% that our clients need to be thinking about, okay, how do we decarbonize? How do we get to zero? And then from a nature point of view, 90% of nature impact, or negative impact, is connected with resource extraction. So they are very much aware that as things like TCFD and TNFD come into play, which is like the task force for financial disclosures around climate and nature, as they come into play, our clients know that they have to do more and they have to use circularity as a lever. And so they are asking us these questions of, okay, how do we go from pilot to scale? And that's basically my job. And my job is to get them to be as ambitious as they can be. So it's not enough for them to say, okay, we're zero waste to landfill, or we're zero waste. It's like, actually, we're circular. And what does that mean? And for us, it's from a circularity perspective, and you probably heard a lot of us talk about circularity in a very different way. So for us, it means regenerative, and making sure that whatever products that you produce actually have no impact on the environment at all, or have minimal impact, or there is some kind of plan in place to have anything that's unavoidable be managed. And I think we're having such interesting conversations because there are other topics that are growing, and so circularity is almost seen as like a way to transform business. But as much as we're talking, the doing is a little bit slow. And I think the doing is a little bit slow, mainly because circularity is actually really complicated, especially within big business. You need so many different people to get on board and get involved. And within companies, sometimes there's a silo of like, oh, that's a procurement problem, that's a waste problem. But waste is inherently a design flaw. And so we need to have every single part of the business. So finance needs to fund the projects at scale. Procurement need to make sure that circular procurement is embedded into their operations. Suppliers need to be on board. So there's so many different moving parts, and everyone has their day job. So it's quite challenging to get them to move the dial. But what has worked quite well is actually getting the C-suite on board. So once the board is embedded into that, and it's a lot of engagement, it's a lot of talking, and setting their ambition, then we can take that ambition and say, okay, what does this look like, and who do we need to get on board? If the CEO says we're going to be a circular business by X date, it kind of cascades down, and it's more about planning. So there is, but I'm also very conscious that oftentimes these businesses actually have pilot projects or minimal projects that are happening at the ground level. And it's thinking about, okay, how do you recognize what's happening on the ground and elevate that? And so we tend to use case studies of what's going on within those businesses to then show to the CEOs, to CFOs of, here's what your department's been doing. Here's the impact, usually cost savings. Here's the impact that it's had on their department. How can you replicate that across the board, and how much saving could you potentially get? And then that tends to get a lot of people on board. So there is both the conversation around decarbonization, but also the cost element is driving a lot of that discussion. But I will stop rambling now.
Not rambling at all, that's fascinating. A few things that I'd like to pick up on, but one thing that comes to mind, let's assume through some wild surmise that we have a new government next year, the Labour Party take power. What sort of signals, first of all, have you heard coming from them that might boost the prospects of the circular economy? And what policies would you like to see them adopt that would help drive it?
I'll mention one thing that probably lots of people know about already. So we waited for many, many years for a consultation on mandatory reporting of food waste by large companies. The government decided to keep it voluntary. Now, I think we all know, like, the report, well, measurement is really important to inform any decision making, but reporting publicly is really critical, so that companies are at a kind of level playing field with competitors, and have that accountability to customers and other stakeholders. We know that voluntary reporting has not worked. Some companies have been doing it, but they're then putting that information out and are subject to criticism often, whereas their competitors are not. We are supporting Feedback, the charity, to take legal action against the government at the moment, to try to bring in that mandatory reporting. So I'm not hopeful that it will happen with this government at all, but we will certainly be pushing for it with the next.
Thank you. Harriet.
Yes, so at RAB, we're part of the Green Alliance. Some of you might know the Green Alliance, who lobby all parties to have the policies that we need. And we have a circular economy task force within that, and RAB, we're part of that. And we've absolutely been seeking to put forward the policies that we need to promote a circular economy. I still think it comes back to the comms issue, that I don't think people in the front bench yet understand that the circular economy could be a winner with the public. It still is too esoteric. And so I think that's our challenge. And I'm sharing you, and I'm putting out a challenge then, is how can we make it something that politicians see will be popular? Especially because we do all know that waste is an issue that gets people very excited on the doorstep. People do really care about it. And I think if we can create this as the positive vision, then so that people see that it has got mainstream appeal, which is where I think it really matters to have both the community initiatives and the SMEs, but to also have the big boys. Otherwise, we won't convince the politicians because they'll think nice little middle class climate action NGO idea. And we've got to show them this is right at the heart of some of the biggest companies in the country are thinking about circularity, in fact, are way ahead, I would say, of the politicians. So what would we like to see? I think, first of all, we'd like a target. Wales has a target to have a circular economy, and so therefore they want waste to come into Wales, and they want to turn it into goods that people in Wales can enjoy while generating jobs. And I think as a nation we need a target like that. I think we need to ban planned obsolescence. It cannot be okay to produce products that after a short period of time are no longer user-worthy. And I think there's lots of guidance we can follow within the EU here. But I think banning the planned obsolescence, that means your phone can no longer be used, can no longer get the updates after a short time, that is totally counter to the whole circular economy. So making sure that that is banned. I think introducing the right to repair would be the next one, that you have a right to take your goods back. And again, we can look at really interesting initiatives in France where they actually currently have a scheme where if you go to an accredited repairer of your clothes, you will actually get a grant to pay them to repair your clothes, for example. So again, encouraging jobs, encouraging the local economy, but also encouraging people to repair and keep things going for longer. And then I think the polluter pays principle is absolutely key. And that's where it was obviously so upsetting for everybody that along with not doing mandatory food waste reporting, the government kicked down the road the extended producer responsibility, which means all companies will have to pay for the products that they put onto the market. And that delay actually has driven business up the wall. It is really interesting. Having worked all my life with businesses, I've never seen such a hunger for regulation because the leaders are being undercut by the laggards. And some of them are going really far because they think legislation's coming in. And when it then doesn't come in, they're left high and dry at an uncompetitive position. So I think really that all of us helping encourage the importance of bringing in extended producer responsibility as soon as possible, along with consistency between local authorities on their waste collections, all of this will help drive the work streams that will lead to companies adopting more circular, because it will become legislatively and financially more and more in their interest, as well as being the right thing to do.
Two things. My hobby horse at the moment is hemp. So again, for the printing industry, everybody that talks about fashion and fast fashion, I always ask questions, what do you think about hemp? And they all go, ooh, what are you talking about? Ridiculous statistics. 19,000 hectares are under hemp in France. Guess how many acres there are in the UK? 800. To plant hemp in the UK, you have to go to the government, the firearms department, and get a license from the firearms department to plant hemp. It's not at DEFRA. So when we think about circularity, we think about carbon reduction, we think about making paper, we're thinking about making hempcrete, we think about making insulation, all those things, we can do that and we can sequester a load of carbon. But the big thing for Labour, for me, is a carbon value. The moment you put a value on carbon, you put a value on something's end of life, and the moment you do that, I don't know if it's in a Yorkshire accent, but where there's muck, there's brass. It will immediately form a circular logic. So we're putting value on something that's end of life, and that is, if the Labour government can do one thing, just do that, and it'll fix so much.
Thank you. Any thoughts down there on government policies?
Yeah, I'm quite removed from government, but in terms of full life ownership, that's very much part of our thinking, and what we're doing in one side of the business, where we're doing sort of signage and exhibition work, where we're saying we take full responsibility of it and we pull it back, and that thinking is important to get out to our clients on a wider level, who are starting to appreciate that and starting to appreciate the carbon disclosures that we're putting out as well. So we're trying to influence their thinking and them understanding their scope 3s.
Any thoughts on policies, regulation?
I think Harry already covered a lot of the ones I'd flag.
She gave a tremendous, comprehensive list of a wish list. Have you sent it to Keir Starmer?
Anyone would think I'd already written to Rachel Reeves or talked with her team.
Excellent. Good. Let's take a couple from Slido. We've got a good one here. Anonymous is being very active today, I'm pleased to see. And they've asked, what are the skills gaps for a more circular economy?
Can I start? Okay, so there are quite a few, I think. I'm like, where do I start? So I think people need to have a pretty good understanding of whole life of products in general, and I don't necessarily know if that's technically a skills gap. I think that's more of a knowledge gap. So I think there needs to be more information around waste management in general and where things end up, because I think because people don't know where things end up, they don't actually plan for it at procurement or at purchasing stage for like everyday people. But from a skills point of view, I think also like economically, like figuring out how does this actually financially, how does this work? Because within our world, a lot of the times our clients ask us, okay, but what is it going to cost me? And how does this, like, what does this look like? And if I buy something today and I don't have to get rid of it for 10 years, then what is the value of that going to look like at the 10-year mark? So I think there's a little bit of a gap from an economic side point of view. And I think also just procurement and how to write really good contracts that mean that end of life is embedded into those like contracts, especially with long-term ones. If you're thinking about waste management contracts for like local government, that's another big thing. But there's just a couple of the many skills that I think we need. Also just repairing, being able to repair things in general is missing massively.
Absolutely. Harriet, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, all jobs have to become green jobs. And so then every job we need to be thinking about what are the implications. And then there are some very specific gaps. For example, we've mentioned a few times regenerative farming. Absolutely, there's a gap in number of people being trained in farming at all, let alone in regenerative farming or horticulture. We definitely don't have enough young people, particularly women, taking STEM subjects and going on to specialise, so that we have something like 2% of the retrofit coordinators we need if we're going to help make our homes more circular. We absolutely have to tackle this skills problem, but also going right back to schools and the subjects people choose and then the choices they make at college, and then making sure the colleges are there, plus, of course, the apprenticeships. So I can mention a brilliant example, Vector Sets, who won an Ashton Award, actually. They work in the film industry and television programs, and which normally it turns out to be is an enormous site of waste, that people literally build a bathroom with a bath and tiles and everything to make a little tiny 1 nanosecond in the bathroom, and then it all just goes in the skip. Yeah. And instead, Vector Sets have been making sets out of cardboard, which look exactly like the real thing. It's incredible. When you see them on television, they look like the real thing. When you go and visit their studio in Stockton, you could see the real thing. So, and they've taken on apprenticeships. It's training people in the skills of how to cut paper in a way that can make these sets. So I think each sector taking on apprenticeships is absolutely key to some of the ways forward. But then I'd also like to raise another question, which is about who is getting the jobs in the circular economy. So now I'm going to ask you all to participate in a very quick little quiz. In the mainstream economy, half of all jobs go to men, half to women, roughly. I want you to think whether you think in the circular economy it's 75% of jobs go to women, 50% of jobs go to women, or 25% of jobs go to women. And you've got to play online as well. Just to yourself, I'm going to ask you all to raise your hand now. Do you think 25% of the jobs in the circular economy are going to women? Okay, no votes for those of you online.
One.
Oh no, one.
One vote.
Oh, two, creeping up. Do you think it's 50%, same as the mainstream economy? Do you think it's 75%? Okay, the whole room has voted 75%.
It will turn out to be 2.
And the tragedy is it's 25%.
25.
Man, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
So we've got to not only generate these jobs, we've got to make sure we're reaching out to women as much as men, that we're reaching out to marginalised communities and those areas that don't have so many jobs. We're reaching out to people who can't get access, like apprenticeships. So,
clarifying question just on that. Is that reflecting the fact that most STEM jobs still go to men?
yes, I think we'd have to dig down into it a bit more deeply, but I think that is. And the other thing, guess where most of the women's jobs are? Guess what? They're in charity shops selling second-hand textiles, which is obviously is part of the circular economy, is a critical part, on which I depend for all my clothes. But it's the lowest paid. So I'm sure you're right, and I'd probably have to come back to you on that.
Chidibem, did you want to?
Yeah, because I think that point around like the 25%, and I think there's a lack of visibility on what a circular job actually looks like. So it could range from different things. So one of my obsessions, and the one thing I really want people to kind of become aware of and also participate in, especially women, is data and how critical data is going to be from a circularity point of view. Because if you're thinking about it from a whole life approach, at the end of life, you're going to collect a lot of data. So if let's take textiles as an example. You make the clothes, they get worn, they get taken to charity shop or to the bank or whatever. If we have a circular system that allows you to process that waste and understand, okay, how did it perform in the real world? Where can it go? Where can it end up? You end up with a lot of data, which can then be fed back into whoever's making those clothes in the first place. And then they can make improvements on how they design the products. So for me, I think getting a grasp on data is actually critical. And I don't want to be like a tech bro, but I think it's really important for people to actually understand how data has an impact on sustainability in general. And as we get more disclosures, it's going to be absolutely critical to be able to get a handle or grasp on data as well.
I'll add also the importance of really soft skills and actually like creativity is critical. A lot of the solutions in the circular economy come about through experimentation and looking at other industries, other models, even looking back at the past. The original recipes from beer were actually brewed from bread, so it's not a new innovation, but it's that the creativity and the curiosity to explore and find solutions. And I think there is that's a challenge for schools as well, where where we're pushing a lot of children down academic routes and not valuing a lot of creative skills as well. And then also the ability to build relationships, because often the solutions come about through conversations that we have with people, understanding. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who is working and has developed a vegan leather that is made from spent grain, so one of the waste products from the brewing industry, and that is then sparking other ideas. So it's really important that young people are also not siloed into particular professions, and also have that skills of building wider relationships.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to take another one from here. I imagine one or two people in the room are consultants, and somebody said, as consultants, what are the most effective ways of embedding circularity in our clients' business when they see it as a nice to have? I'm going to interpret that, and shout out at me if you're in the room and I've got this wrong, when they see it as just a nice to have rather than a must have. So how do we make it something that clients see as absolute must have?
As the consultant, should I go? Okay, so for me, I think what's worked really well is actually case studies. So the big question whenever we go into the room is who's done it, how have they done it, and how well have they done it? So I think we need more examples of where things have worked really, really well, and being able to shout about them. And as we get from pilot to scale, also making sure that people tell that story again. So at the side of my day job, I host a podcast on fashion, because I'm specifically trying to get more case studies out there of, okay, what exactly have you done? How has it been successful, and how did you do it? Because I think that's critical to then enable other businesses, whether they're in the same industry or not, to then be able to take what you've done and amplify it. And that's the only way you get scale.
Yeah. Harriet.
Well, what we do at VAP is try to have pre-competitive collaborations where we can get lots of companies together. It goes back to the earlier discussion when I think it was Margaret said that actually even quite brave leaders are nervous to be too far ahead of everyone else. They want to have first mover advantage, but they don't want to be left stranded and in an uncompetitive position. So I think what's really important is that people feel they're part of a whole movement within their sector, say. So, for example, at VAP, we've got together the furniture sector to think together, what are we going to do to drive circularity and drive out waste in furniture? Then everyone can sit around the table, whether they're from DFS or from Kingfisher, and share ideas, share what's worked, share what's been a disaster. They can learn from each other, but also feel safe about how to drive it forward on a whole sector approach that I think then can be reassuring to a business that doesn't yet see it as being right at the core if they hear that their competitors are doing it.
Yeah. Another question here that I'm just going to also add something to. So Joey Tabone has asked, does circularity information on product labeling change consumer behavior? And obviously that plays to a few things that have come up in discussion, including in the plenary earlier about the role of consumers. And it's curious how the present government seems to have decided that circularity is almost a vote loser, with all that stuff around 7 bins. You know, under the Tories, you'll never have to have 7 bins in your kitchen, which nobody, of course, was proposing. But is there a consumer lever to pull here? Because, as I say, the government seems to think it works in the opposite direction. What do we think?
To Joey's question, it's all about true cost in the first thing. It's all about true cost, and true cost is, for us, and I think for everybody here, is about telling the story, and it's the narrative. So, which flips back to the previous question, which is, well, is it just a nice to have? If we tell the story in a proper way, people will get it, and ultimately this is the only game in town. There is no choice. So, and by putting numbers to it, going back to the true cost piece, which is what does it cost to make a pair of jeans, and that needs to be put on every single one of your, fashion statements every time a pair of jeans costs this much in power and water and everything else. those true cost statements. The government talks about planting trees. I went to Groundswell, which was fascinating. And if anybody hasn't been to Groundswell, you should go. Yeah. To plant a tree costs 80 quid. So the government doesn't tell you that. They say it costs £1. It costs 80 quid. It's super expensive. So the true cost of when somebody goes, oh, I'm going to offset carbon, and my fictitious tree is out there and I'm going to get 10 tons from it. It costs 80 quid to plant the tree. And you need to have however many trees to offset the carbon. It's super expensive. So we need that true cost narrative and that storytelling constantly, which will then turn a whole lot of lights on, going, oh shit, this is really going to hurt.
I'll add that it is really challenging to tell a story on a pack, with a limited amount of space, and then with a limited amount of time that people spend, for example, on the supermarket shelves. It's super hard to get any messages across. So where the labelling question comes in, I'm not quite sure how to do it in a way that is engaging enough and meaningful enough for consumers. So I think, it comes back to how you embed it in your company and what that means for the business, cost, etc. And then finding other ways of telling your story through your products and services. So, for example, at our tap room, you can come and purchase beer from tap with a reusable growler. So we have a separate offering where people can participate in the circular economy. And I think that is really key. How do we get people to feel what it means rather than necessarily have a stamp that says this is what a company is doing about it?
Yeah, interesting.
I think I'm also a bit on the fence with labeling sometimes. I think one thing that companies actually tend to underestimate is how much they train people who are the interface with their customers. So when you go to, I don't know, a store and you see something is like, oh, this is sustainable. When you ask the clerk, why is it sustainable? They can't tell you the story because they haven't been trained on what the story actually is. Yeah. So I think it's super important to actually be thinking about, okay, what is the interface with our customer, and how do we make sure that anyone who's interfacing with our customer actually tells a really interesting story as well.
On the other hand, can I come in as a proponent of product labelling? So I used to work at Fairtrade, so that was all about the label, and I think a label is as good as two things. Obviously, the standards that lie behind it, so it really is vigorous and meaningful. It's not greenwashing. The customer can feel reassured, and the extent to which it is known by the public and can then help take something to be more than the sum of its parts, that's right, isn't it? To make the total more than the sum of the parts, because it is very complicated, the circular economy. There are so many different ways in which it can operate, and we're not all pulling together and getting that cut through in public consciousness, because over here somebody's repairing my clothes, and over here someone's whole business model is based around the circular economy, and they're very different, but they actually have the same principles. So I believe if we could crack that, I think a label would help. I think it would help get that cut through. It's not that it would be done easily or lightly, but I actually think that is, with Fairtrade, that was undoubtedly how we got cut through on the principle of paying a fair deal to farmers and workers in the developing world. It didn't solve the problem, but it was really key to helping raise awareness. So I'd actually like to do another really quick poll with the audience here. Sorry, everyone online. You can vote in your own room. I'd just like people to raise their hands whether they think we should do product labelling in the circular economy or not. So raise your hand if you think we should. Oh yeah, I would say it's overwhelmingly in favour for those online. There are some who may not know or may be against, but I would say it's overwhelmingly in favour.
Ask who's against. Ask who thinks it's a bad idea.
Who thinks it's a bad idea? I would love to hear people's views, but I think we're not allowed to pass the mic around out of consideration for all those online. Yeah. Anybody against? Anyone think it's a bad idea?
No.
No, so maybe it's more cynical or unsure about whether it, okay, people are nodding. It's more, people are unsure. And we have got a lot of products out there, and that you can come too early with a label, which is what, don't know if any of you remember, Tesco's did a carbon footprint years ago. It never took off. No one had a clue what it meant. Was that good or was that bad? Even labelling of fruit and veg, which is colour-coded, it's quite hard not to work out that red is bad and green is good. It's not thought to be driving any change in consumer behaviour. So the label alone is not enough. It's got to be with a whole lot of storytelling and other things that will make it as cheap and as easy for people to choose a product with this happy little logo as not.
And what about, because Seacourt and Delphis, it's fair to say you're principally B2B, not B2C. I mean, just to sort of widen it out a bit, in a B2B context, the equivalent of winning business potentially through advertising what you are in sustainability and circular terms?
Yeah, so the trick for us and most business-to-business companies is speaking to clients and challenging them on their buying criteria, because it can't simply be cost first. That's how we got in this mess. This is the linear business model, and we can't go on. And so you have to fundamentally challenge companies to change their values and how they're purchasing goods and services, what's important. And that feeds into carbon reporting, coming into SMEs as well as larger organizations. And when you start to provide evidence, we've got an environmental calculator that we can demonstrate savings that we produce every time we produce a job. That can then feed into their own net zero targets, which is starting to create value, and therefore you're taking the conversation away from pure cost, which is completely flawed, to actual real impact. And that's the real challenge, and especially so in government departments as well, linking back into what the government can do. I mean, there's so much they can do.
Yeah. Mark, your point of view, driving business?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, certainly 15, 16 years ago, to go to a gnarly facilities management company and say, hey, use eco-friendly, plant-based cleaning products to clean your hospital, and the answer was always, well, if it doesn't singe my nose hairs, then it doesn't work. So there's been a huge journey in trying to get people to change, but I think it is changing. And our language as a business is, we don't sell cleaning products, we sell the ability to be more sustainable, and it's a really easy tick. So then you kind of, again, we calculate carbon calculators and how much can we save for you, and again, what is the true cost? Because, do you know what, if you're using bleach, it's the equivalent to smoking 20 fags a day. So what's the class action suit that's coming to you, KPMG, because you guys have a company that uses bleach to clean your loos? It's coming. So, you know, I'm now starting to poke the bear a lot, because we need to change, and we need to change super quickly. We don't have time to waste.
We've got a question here about how to measure. How do you find ways, or how can you measure new concepts of circularity to drive change within companies? An interesting question, because I mean, with certain things we're used to measuring, like carbon footprint now, it's not necessarily all that accurately, but if we have it as a concept. I mean, is there going to be an equivalent of how circular are you? You're 78% circular. Where are we getting to on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely, you can measure. So if that glass is virgin glass versus recycled glass, there is a demonstrable value to a second-hand or a repurposed product. And I think that's where the value is, because then you can go to your customer and say, well, instead of using virgin plastic, use recycled plastic. It's saving you 70% carbon. That goes to your Scope 3 reduction. So I think it's becoming super demonstrable, and then we need this carbon value, because then that becomes a real monetary thing.
Absolutely. In our pre-competitive collaborations that we do at that, we set targets. It's all based around Target, Measure, Act. If you set targets and you measure and you report, then that drives the action. So we absolutely have targets around, for example, percentage of recycled content in bottles as a very easy one to have. And actually, some of you might have noticed in your milk bottles that if you buy plastic milk bottles, They always used to have blue or green or red lids, and they're now increasingly white. That's a direct result of the target to increase the recyclability of the milk bottle. And the retailers were absolutely adamant that the public couldn't possibly choose semi-skimmed over full cream on the basis of the label alone. They needed the lid. And it took one to do it and to find that actually the public could cope. And now you will see gradually Lidl, Aldi, M&S, Sainsbury's are all doing it. And that is exactly a result of the percentage of recycled content that you need to have in your products as one manifestation of the circular economy. It's obviously only one. Lifetime of products would be another. Do you repair them would be another. So absolutely we work, and at WRAP we have a lot of nerds. We love nerdy problems, experts. So I think, by the way, I'm going to go back and ask some of the nerds about your cleaning product challenge. And so people, it's really hard, but to find ways to measure that will work across companies is absolutely critical. Otherwise, we can't make progress.
Yeah. Good event.
So we helped develop a tool with the WBCSD called the Circular Transition Indicators. And that helps companies actually understand how circular they are. So again, going back to how much of your inputs are virgin versus recyclable or reusable? What's the lifetime of your product? Like, how is it being used? How can you make improvements? How can you make it more modular, repairable, etc.? So there's so many. There is like almost, it's becoming a bit of a standard now. And I think there's a lot more work to do to make it more of a standard within business. But that tool, it's called the CTI tool, exists and it's available for companies to use. And there are different variations of it that are coming out, kind of thinking about not just circularity, but okay, what is your carbon impact? What is your nature impact in relation to circularity? So there's a lot of work being done and a lot of consultation with big business to help them to start to measure what circularity looks like, because again, they do need to measure it, especially as they do more disclosure with things like TCFD, CSRD, etc., all the acronyms of regulation that are coming in.
There's an interesting question here, which I think I can understand, and if I can't, somebody else might be able to, which is interesting, talking about labeling and saying, could the label show the long life monetary value on products per day or per month or per year basis, e.g. saying this particular cup will presumably, it's saying, save you this amount per day if kept for this period. Is that yours? Can you shout out to us what your... Yeah. Is there a way of capturing the monetary value of being more circular? Yeah. So is there a way of...
Yes, it's almost like the 30, because so in fashion there's this thing where they talk about 30 wears. So when you go in to buy a product, thinking about it from okay, it costs X, but will I actually wear it 30 times? And then that kind of shows you how inexpensive it is usually for a product that's a little bit more pricey, really.
Yeah. We've got an interesting question here on, is that anonymous again? And it may not be something which any of you would like to speak to, but it'd be interesting to hear if you do. What role can urban design and the built environment play in promoting circularity in society? Any thoughts on that? Designing, yes, Mark.
I'm going to throw a hand grenade. Do we think the oil industry is lobbying to such an extent that they are stopping the recycling industry from innovating? So to go back into that question, the recycling industry is infinitely fixable. It's a very simple thing to fix, yet it's not being fixed. And why is it not being fixed? And my cynical self would say it is much better for the oil industry to keep everything linear and burning fossil fuels to produce virgin products than recycle. And if we don't fix that, then it doesn't matter what you do in the built environment, because it is going to be a linear system.
Yes. Harriet.
Well, I agree, by the way, and I did want to say I absolutely do think we could use also QR codes could take people to websites where they could find out how long a product would last or something, because maybe you can't fit everything on the product, but we could use QR codes and links through much more than we perhaps do. I think to come to the urban, the built environment, construction is way up there as one of our most carbon intensive sectors. where not enough is being done. So absolutely, construction and the built environment is absolutely key to promoting the circular economy and ensuring that building companies are putting the circular principles into the materials they're using, in particular steel and cement, and using more circular alternatives, of which there are many amazing companies. Seacut is one, making railway sleepers out of the plastic that we all throw away. So that's just one tiny example. We could roll this out through the sector, but it's not doing it because of the cheapness of the fossil fuel-based alternatives, and because the government are not giving them the right incentives, particularly to housing. So absolutely, we should put this into the regulated building regs, particularly if they're going to loosen up planning in any future government. It must include, as a quid pro quo, making the builder sector adopt those kind of principles. And then I think of the principles of circularity within the way we're building. And then I think, like, we could also reimagine the high street, couldn't we? The high street is dying. So we could also use the high street for amazing initiatives where people will repair goods and will offer you services and will rent you services, so you don't have to buy a new dress for the gala awards tonight. You can go and rent it. So that could also help revitalise the high street. So I think it could work really well in a number of ways.
I guess the other thing with the built environment is also thinking about when you design a building, how do you design it to enable circularity when it's in its use as well? Because I think we talk a lot about, okay, how do you design a building that's modular and like refurbishable, like whatever. But we also actually need to be thinking about practically when people are in it, like how can we allow them to be circular within those buildings?
Excellent. Slightly nice provocative question here. Somebody saying, isn't EPR not just another tax to the consumer? I presume we're talking about producer responsibility. Yeah. Who wants to take that one?
It is.
It could be. Yeah, it could
Well,
be.
I was going to say, does it need, turn it around a bit, does it need to be? Are there ways of doing it where the cost, as in all these things, the question is, oh, it's just going to be another cost to the consumer. That's always the challenge that they're thrown in the way of anybody suggesting doing business more sustainably. Are you just going to pass on the costs to the consumer?
Well, they're kicking the can down the road, right? Recycling again is infinitely doable, and by saying, oh, it's my responsibility as the homeowner to then, take my little plastic bag back to Tesco's for that to then get recycled or go somewhere else, it's ridiculous. We have recyclers that come past our homes. They need to do their job, and the stuff needs to get fixed and get repurposed. So recycling is fixable. Pushing the can down the road it's an absolute tax.
It could be a tax. It could be companies make less profit. It could be. It could be that you start to put in the true cost of making and disposing a product, because that will help. The economics would then help drive the changes that we need to see. As long as companies can make products and leave local authorities to wrestle with these minute budgets they've got, from which they've also got to collect all the rubbish so that companies can make more profit. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with that. I think it's right that as a principle, the polluter pays. Okay, they may, of course, pass it on into increased cost to the consumer. Most likely they will, but it will also hopefully drive the change behaviours that will lead them to put less wasted product onto the market in the first place, and will make the economics of redesigning tip in the right direction.
But just before Louisa comes in, just to build on that a little bit, does that mean it's better to look for regulation rather than a fiscal incentive if you want to avoid that cost being passed on to the consumer?
Yeah, and the cost of regulation can still be passed on to the consumer as well. But I think with the EPR, the intention was that it wouldn't impact small businesses. So it was like, I think 2 million revenue was the minimum level to be involved in that scheme. So actually that's really beneficial from a micro and SME basis, that we can start to put more pressure on the bigger companies to do the right thing and enable small companies who are often at the forefront of innovation and problem solving that we really need to be at a better playing level from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, but if you wind the whole thing all the way back and you want to change behaviour, tax. It's really simple. Just change the corporation tax structure. You're more polluting, you generate more waste, you pay more tax. We report quarterly on our VAT. The metrics are there. It can very easily quarterly report on our carbon impact as a business. You're going to pay 90% more than I pay because you're polluting 90% more than I am. I mean, we put a tax on some plastic bags and look what happened. Yeah. You know, this stuff, it's not rocket science. Yeah. We can do this stuff, but it just needs someone at the top to have the ambition to actually say, yes, we can do this stuff. It is doable. We can change it. Let's get on with it.
Excellent. Chiduben, a last word to you.
Yeah, so I guess, so one of the things I was thinking about is also like the impact of like the plastic tax on the types of plastic that companies then ended up putting onto or are putting onto the market. So I think there is, and it might be a little bit biased given the kind of companies that we work with and the fact that they're very innovative and want to make change and want to be sustainable and like ESG kind of focused. But we are seeing companies actually think about EPR as a way to change their product because they know there is the potential to get some of that backlash. Because we've obviously seen things with like shrinkflation and how the consumer reacted to that. So it could be a tax, but it could also be a driver for change within business.
Yeah. Excellent. We're drawing to a close now. Before I thank the panel, just a reminder, we've got one more breakout session before lunch. There are 4 to choose from. In Carter, there's a leadership roundtable. That's actually a one you've had to sign up for in advance. So if you haven't signed up to that, that's not open. But then in Murrell, we've got the question of does climate trump everything when it comes to purpose? In Anderson and Barnes, we're looking at how to power up your supply chain. And in Prince, it's all about building partnerships. So that's what's coming up. I think that's a really fascinating discussion, actually. I've learned a lot. So please join me in thanking all our panelists. Thank you very much.